Give it a few more seconds. It is 12 o'clock. Thanks everybody for joining us who is here so far. So I'm going to get started. We have a great session planned for you guys today. This is our second session of our draft, submit, and revise the manuscript writing series put on to you by ICTR. We're the Institute of Clinical and Translational Research here in the School of, the Public Health and Medicine, as well as our affiliate at Marshfield Clinic Research Institute. So just a really quick introduction of our guests today. We have Yevon and Ben talking about AI and science writing, Heather, who is talking about considerations, ethics, policies, and then we have Paige, who is here to talk about citation management. So quick introduction right there, because they're going to talk about themselves and all the awesome work that they do. Please keep yourselves muted. If the internet's getting a little wacky, if you turn your videos off, that will help with the bandwidth. If you have questions, please ask them in the comments. We're going to have questions after each speaker goes. So as you think of it, put it in the chat and we will get to it when we can. If you run into any problems, please write it in the chat. We have a team working behind the scenes who will try to remedy any situations that pop up. All right, you guys ready? I'm going to stop sharing and we'll switch over to Ben's screen.
Okay, hey everyone. My name is Ben Rush. I'm one of the first presenters along with Jevon Lorty. I'm going to switch over to our slides as we'll be talking about AI for science writing. Jevon, can you see the slides? I'll make a full slideshow at this point.
Yeah, it looks good.
Sweet. So yeah, Jevon and I are coming as fellow scientists. Both Jevon and I did our PhDs here at UW-Madison, and we've been working in the same lab, graduated at the same time. We're best friends. So we can't stop doing everything together, including learning about AI. And I think Jevon and I had witnessed all these different times of seeing really great communication and also very poor communication all the way from presentations to manuscripts. And I think naturally we were just starting to figure out how can AI help smooth that whole transition. So Jevon and I, a couple weeks ago, put on an AI for Scientists workshop, covered all different subjects of science communication, LinkedIn, manuscripts, research, and happy to chat about that a little bit more. We've got our contact information here. We developed a prompt library, and we'll talk about exactly what prompts are as well, but these are cut and paste cookie cutter things that you can put into some of these interfaces for large language models and get results quickly. Like we've worked with them and make sure they're pretty good. So we've shared that. That's for everybody, and you feel free to share as well. But we thought we'd try to focus in a little bit more on manuscript writing, since that's kind of a series. And I can start by sharing the messy world of these large language models, or LLMs. So everyone has probably heard of ChatGPT. Gemini has been in the news a little bit more. We have free access to Microsoft Copilot as UW employees. Lots of different things out there. I've made a little bit of a summary table here to show you what is for free and is also what is for paid. So anything that is paid is kind of in this yellowish, tannish color. Again, we have access to Microsoft Copilot as UW-Madison employees. I don't know about Marshall, but sorry about that. You can also see what they might be useful for beyond just writing as well, in case you're curious. Oftentimes, these services will have a free model that works pretty well, and then a paid model, and it seems like everybody is charging $20 per month. Things rapidly develop. So yesterday I was double checking and getting these slides ready, and then at the bottom, the company Anthropic released their new model Claude, which is supposedly even better than GPT-4, which is like the benchmark. So it's a rapidly innovative field, for better or worse. And Jevon and I spent a lot of time in this field and still are learning new things. So don't feel bad if you're like, oh, there's so much to keep up on, because there is so much to keep up on. But what we're going to present to you, kind of this framework of interacting with these large language models via a user interface like ChatGPT, should be good for any of these, whatever you choose. And I've tested some of these prompts again with Copilot, and they seem to work as well. So in case you want to dive in underneath the hood a little bit more and measure these large language models compared to one another, I put a website link at the bottom. I think you'll get all the slides in case you want to look, but this website, Artificial Analysis, does rank all these different models compared to price, quality, speed, all that kind of stuff. But let's dive into some ways of thinking about LLMs. And Jevin, I'll pass it to you.
Thanks, Ben. And a few caveats before we dive in. We like to view these models as overeager interns. And this metaphor translates to a lot of different aspects of how we interact with them, but consider them as overeager interns in that they can only do so much, but they really want to help you. And they'll go to drastic lengths to fulfill whatever you ask them to do, including making things up. So be very careful when you use these because they are not programmed to say, I don't know. They will give you a positive response, even if it's wrong or not. To continue the analogy, they get overwhelmed easily. So if you give them too much background information, or if you give them too large a task, just like an inexperienced intern, they will perform less, the output will be worse. So also keep that in mind. If you're getting not great results, just sort of break it down into smaller chunks. Ask your intern to do less, give them very clear instructions, very discrete details, and you will get better results. Always human check. Like I said, they make things up. They tend to be a little wordy. So use your critical thinking skills and your human editing skills with whatever they give you. And we are primarily using the paid version of ChatGPT and Perplexity. While we think our prompting techniques we're about to show you work really well for all these models, those are the main ones that we are focusing on and testing at the moment. And like Ben said, these are advancing so quickly that our prompt effectiveness could change. With new updates that are released under the hood of these models, it sometimes tweaks the results that you get. So all of a sudden, something that's been working fantastically for you might start to give you less quality of output. So keep that in mind. You might have to be a little flexible and change what you're doing if you start to see a dip in performance. And with that, we can move on to the next slide. And robot is a
Jevin, I
mnemonic.
have a real quick question.
Yeah, go ahead, Ben.
What type of information should we give these large language models? Should we give any like private health information or anything like that?
Yeah, be careful about that. So we can't guarantee that what you put into them won't be used for training or shared with other users. There are some models that are private, but for most of them that you're just testing out, that are unpaid, you're more likely to have that data go into their training of their model. So no private health information. And if you're concerned about other things you're entering in, like your top secret science question that you just found out, then maybe keep that out too. And then moving on to prompting. So prompting is just how we talk about interacting and giving the models instructions. So we developed robot as a mnemonic. It stands for role, objective, background, output, and trial and error. So we want to start with giving the AIs a role. They essentially have the knowledge of the entire internet to draw from. So we need to give them something to focus on to get our output a little bit more tailored to what we want. And then we need to give it an objective. So essentially, what do you want to accomplish? So if our role is you're a highly trained academic researcher, our objective might be, I want you to help me write a specific aims page for my grant. And be as clear as you can in this, really breaking it down for that helpful intern in very specific language. And then next is background. So give it as much background as you can while being concise. Sometimes you can give it too much background. So that's up for you to play around with. I wouldn't paste in 100 academic research articles, but some summaries, some abstracts, a few articles, that can go a really long way in getting your output to be tailored to what you want. Some of these can support vision. You can copy and paste PDFs. Some, typically the free versions are text only, so you're gonna have to copy and paste the text. Some can access links to the internet and you can give them a website to access. That gets a little riskier since they're gonna be drawing a lot of information from that website. Next is output. So be very specific about what kind of results you're looking for. If you can give it exact examples of the format. So in this example, giving it specific aims pages that it can pull from, it can read the format and know exactly what to give back to you. That's going to give you the best result. In lieu of that, you can simply describe what you want. Say, I want a one-length page written in an academic style. It helps to describe the tone here, the page length. It'll ballpark it, but it's notoriously bad at hitting a specific word count or page count. And then trial and error. So keeping in mind that we want to be flexible here. It might not give you exactly what you want right off the bat, but you can tweak as you go. So say you want it to be a little bit longer, you want it to be more concise, you want it to use different language. It forgot something, you can say, be sure to include a hypothesis. Don't take the first thing it gives you and say, oh, that's not what I want, I'm gonna throw it away. Try to work with it a little bit and refine it to really get what you want. And then we can move along to an example workflow for what I've used and what works really well for science writing. And I've broken this down into what's best to use a human for, what's best to use AI for, and then what you can use either depending on your needs. So AI can do these tasks in the middle, but you might need to do them yourself if you need a little more customization, or you might find that they're just easier and faster and more specific to do on your own. So starting with creating an introduction to, say, a scientific manuscript, we want to start with an outline. And this is helpful both for humans and AIs. Breaking it down into discrete chunks is really helpful for the AI. You can do this yourself, or you can have AI draft an outline for you. You can say, write me an outline on this topic. I want to make sure to include a few bullet points. If you do that, be sure to edit it before you go to the next step. The next step would be creating research questions from each bullet point that you've created in your outline. Now, this is really important for the following step, which is we're going to plug those into a research large language model. So an AI that's specifically designed to pull from credible sources. And that could be Perplexity, Scholar AI, Consensus. There's a few out there. We really like Perplexity, but these other ones are great too. And these research questions that you develop, you can come up with them yourself. You can also ask ChatGPT to say, hey, look at my outline, write a question for each bullet point in my outline. And then that research LLM like Perplexity is going to give you a nice summary answering that question, pulling from credible sources. Now, you might know your scientific discipline really well, and you can vet those resources and say, I like this one, I don't like this one. If you're diving into a new topic, it's also really helpful to pull from some credible sources, read those, then go grab some more articles. And then the next step, moving away from these research LLMs, you want to take that output, and they're not necessarily the best at synthesizing and pulling all this language together. So we want to use a text model like ChatGPT or some of these others that are really good at pulling things together and coming up with something nice and cohesive that flows. So what you can do is just paste everything you have from the research LLM into ChatGPT and have it blend those paragraphs together. And of course, you always want to, the next step is editing, put a human eye to this, watch out for hallucinations. These research LLMs hallucinate less. ChatGPT would hallucinate more, which is why we're feeding it exactly what we want it to say. But be very careful, use your critical thinking, and give it a really good edit at this point. Then take that edited version, feed it back into ChatGPT, and use it to help edit. Ask it, what would you improve in this chunk of text? You can say, look for grammar errors, look for clarity, conciseness, give it some guide rails of what you want it to look for. And my favorite tip here is to say, give me your suggestions in bullet points, because you might agree with some, you might disagree with some, and that way you can quickly weed out the ones that you don't want. And then we're to our final edit. Always give it a human eye at the very end of what you're doing. And I think if you click once, we've got a few more tips here. So throughout this whole process, breaking it down into small chunks. So if I wouldn't say write your whole introduction in this from start to finish in this way, I would go paragraph by paragraph. So start with your first paragraph or your first 2 paragraphs and create them, and then feed it back into the AI, and then move on to the next paragraph. You're going to get much better results if you go section by section. Have that intern work in small chunks. Feed every finished section back into the AI so it knows the most detailed version of the context to work from, and move on to the next section. And we have a lot more detail of this in our full workshop. This is essentially probably a half-hour section of that workshop condensed into a couple minutes. So if you're interested, come talk to us or find us on LinkedIn or email afterwards. And then I will hand it off to Ben.
Okay, so now we've got our intro. One thing that I also really love about these LLMs is that they are generally pretty great coders. And I've had as a postdoc on campus, like I'm bouncing in between different coding languages pretty frequently, and it's nice to have them remind me what the language is for Python versus SAS versus SPSS, all that kind of stuff. So Copilot, the one that we have free access to, can generate code for you. It's pretty good. Again, it's not 100%, and then you can always ask it to correct its errors. But it is a good first start, especially if it's a relatively new language. I've got something posted here of just, I'm giving GPT an example to create an ANOVA, like a demo, so just some group comparisons. This prompt is also in our prompt library. I tested it right before this to see if Copilot could do it too, and it can. So it can give you some good analysis, or sorry, the code for analysis. GPT for specifically can actually run some of it, which is also pretty cool. But I find in the method of actual science writing, you can actually copy and paste your code and then ask these LLMs to write either a methods or results section of what type of analysis is being done. So if it's just the code, you can say, here's the models that I'm using. I need it for a clinical audience instead of a machine learning audience, and stuff that I kind of do. And it can put this stuff out. So the written paragraph on the bottom right is actually something generated from the LLM that is good enough that I would put into an actual article. You will have to check with the journal whether they are accepting AI stuff or not. Likewise, if you're able to feed the LLM your methods and your code and then the output of whatever is run in your stats models, then you get something started for your results too. Again, we'll in our workshop, we go over this a lot more. So condensing stuff. We've covered a lot of different things and there's a lot of potential. It may seem very overwhelming, but I think our kind of takeaway point is go and try. I think you'll figure out your rhythm and your method of working with these. And at the same time, they're so big and kind of a big black box that there's no like one prescriptive way that give you results every single time. So feel free to reach out to us if you have more questions. A little bit of time here. The bottom left of the screen is our prompt library where you can start plugging around and seeing what type of output that you want. See if there's something that lines up with what you're trying to do. On the right, we've got a QR code if you're like, oh man, I wish I could do X, Y, and Z, and then this is what really frustrates me if you want to tell us what really sucks about your job. we'll go ahead and take some questions now. And we will also release a poll to see what you dislike most about your everyday kind of repetitive task stuff, and maybe we can help out with prompt that way too. So I will stop sharing and return to the group.
Awesome. Thank you so much, guys. So we'll hopefully get the poll started here in a second. So there are some questions for you. The first is, oh, there goes the poll. Can you see that, Ben?
Yes, and for folks like
Okay.
if you really want to go there, you got 2,000 characters. So, by all means, tell us.
Great. Okay, so first question, are there protections for information submitted into Copilot since we have an institutional subscription? And that might be a good question for our next speaker, Heather. So I don't know if Heather wants to jump in there or not, if you guys have an opinion on that.
I'll defer.
Go ahead, sorry.
Oh, I was just saying, I'm going to defer to you because that's probably your area a bit more.
Yeah, so part of the answer to the question is based on the data classification. So we should not be, as Ben and Jevin pointed out, we should not be putting PHI into these things. We should not be putting any institutional data that is not low risk or public information into any of these. There are some exceptions if they've gone through a review process, and I'm going to detail what that review process looks like in my presentation. So there are some enterprise level things where we might be able to put in data that has a higher classification. But we shouldn't be putting any of that into Copilot, even our institutional version.
Awesome.
I'll add for personal use too, like a lot of these paid accounts, so beyond Copilot, will have an option you can say, like, don't feed my information to the models. They do have some, like a little clause that says, like, we usually hang on to whatever that you put in for 30 days. And it doesn't explicitly say what they're doing for the 30 days. So my mindset too is like, unless you wanted any of the information to get out there, you'd be okay with it being public. I would probably keep everything else out of the LLMs. For my usage, like if I'm doing coding for ANOVA tests, t-tests, these kind of basic stat stuff, everyone's done it. It's out there on the web. I don't feel bad about that being reproduced. And it's not, I'm not giving the LLMs my data either. I'm just asking them to write the script to analyze it.
Great. So we'll do one more question. This one was submitted earlier. Do you have any tips on how to improve efficiency and accuracy of manuscript and grant writing using this type of AI, particularly if you're a non-native English speaker?
Jevin, you want to take this one? I feel like this is a little bit more in your wheelhouse.
Yeah, so accuracy and for non-native grant speakers for grant writing and manuscript writing. Is that what I'm hearing?
Yeah.
Yeah, so I think it would help with as far as like the language. Just it's going to generate pretty good English language. But as far as accuracy for writing grants, I think all of this requires your oversight. So I would be very careful in taking what it gives you at face value. This is great for starting a rough draft, getting past that blank page effect, and which can be really challenging when you're writing a 50-page grant, or if you've got all those smaller sections of the grant where they're a little tedious, like your data management plan, which is very standardized language. You can feed an example, very helpful for that. But I would be very, very cautious in taking what it gives you at face value. One, for the accuracy of the information, and then two, for just cleaning up the language. It's going to give you a nice base that will be grammatically correct, but it might not be the best. It might be a little too wordy. It might use some funny phrases. It might say, you're a trailblazer a few too many times for actual use in a grant, which might just sound a little funny. That said, there are some tips that can help. So using these research specific models that are pulling from good sources like Perplexity, that's going to help a lot. Don't ask ChatGPT to give you answers to your research questions. Ask Perplexity and then feed that into ChatGPT. So that's going to help a lot. And then there's some funny tips also, like you can say, you can use emotional language. You can say, this is super important for my job. My job depends on this. Or I'm going to give you a prize if you do this very accurately. These types of emotional appeals to the language models actually increase performance, surprisingly. And we don't know why entirely. So something to play around with.
Great. Thanks so much. I know a couple more questions came in the chat, but we do need to switch over to Heather. So if you guys want to...
I'll answer them in the chat too. I'll stick around. So.
Perfect. Yeah, I was just going to ask if you wouldn't mind doing that. Awesome. So up next, we have Heather, who is here to talk about policies, ethics, all of that fun stuff with AI. And also, we're going to close the poll. So thanks for those who have filled it out for us. You're muted, Heather.
Thank you. Just a quick overview. I'm going to talk to you about laws, policy, and guidance, potential pitfalls when using generative AI in academic writing, and then advice for using generative AI lawfully, ethically, and in compliance with policy. A lot of this is going to echo or rhyme with what Ben and Jevin already said. So I will try not to belabor the points that they've already made, but I will point out those places where we are aligned. So next. We're going to start with just a brief introduction. If you would like to share in the chat what your name and your title or your role is and one concern you have about using generative AI in academic writing, that would be great. I'll just take a minute to tell you that currently I am an IT policy writer and analyst in the Office of Cybersecurity with Do It here at UW-Madison. I have worked in higher ed for over 15 years, first as an instructor, and then later in pre-award research administration at Miami University. And I had a brief stint where I was a consultant for research admin and research development. And one of the projects that I worked on was post-award support for $72 million in federal grants to support a COVID clinical trial. So I'm pretty familiar with the research and academic sides of the house. I am a native Ohioan. I live in Ohio and work fully remote. And for those of you who care about such things, I am not a Buckeyes fan. Okay, so I want to start by kind of unpacking this term generative AI a little bit. We've got the two pieces of it, the generative and the artificial intelligence. Generative means creating new content. Artificial intelligence means machines simulating human intelligence in some way. So is this accurate? Well, the generative part of it is mostly accurate. They can't really do anything new. They can't really do anything original or innovative. Are they producing text that has never been seen before? Probably. But that's not the same as being innovative in any way. And then the simulating human intelligence part, that's maybe a little bit less accurate. So what generative AI is good at doing is sounding like a human, but they're not really capable of any sort of discernment or judgment. And that's part of what we expect from human intelligence. So what's really happening, I think, Ben and Jevin sort of laid this out, but these systems are combining machine learning algorithms and trained models to create content that's statistically similar to the human creating content in the model's training data sets. So again, it's good at sounding like an intelligent human, but calling it intelligent is probably a step too far. So an overview of laws, policies, and guidance. US copyright law. Here's the kind of language from the copyright law, that it grants the copyright holder the exclusive right to reproduce, display, create derivatives of, and sell copies of original works of authorship fixed in a tangible medium of expression for a statutorily defined period of time. If that sounds straightforward, believe me when I tell you it is not. And I am not a lawyer. I'm not qualified to give legal advice, but the folks in the Office of Legal Affairs are. So if you have any questions about copyright law specifically related to generative artificial intelligence, you can feel free to reach out to them. Policies and guidance. So this is the federal government. All of this is very much up in the air. So Ben and Jevin were saying, you know, the tools are very much up in the air. I think the space is very dynamic. It's developing rapidly. The same is true for kind of the regulatory environment. So I just want to, there's this kind of patchwork of agency guidance on things. I just want to point out two things. One is the executive order on the safe, secure, and trustworthy development and use of artificial intelligence. That has directed the Copyright Office to report on issues related to AI. And then in the meantime, the Copyright Office has issued some guidance. And the most important kind of takeaway from that guidance is that as far as the Copyright Office is concerned, AI cannot be an author. So for copyright purposes, AI cannot be an author. In terms of policy, here at UW-Madison, we don't have an AI-specific policy, but part of that is because there are other policies that kind of address what some of the issues with the AI would likely be. The Chief Information Security Officer, Jeff Savoy, has issued a statement on the use of generative AI. And this is where we get the information about not putting any data that's not public or low risk into non-enterprise generative AI tools or services. So again, that's not a new policy. That's just guidance based on this kind of evolving space. We need to be careful not to expose that data to being revealed to anybody who's not supposed to know it. And of course, it goes without saying that we can't use AI to violate laws, institutional policies, rules, or guidelines, or agreements on contracts. There is a web page that's kind of a resource web page to support that statement. And then at the system level, they also do not have an AI-specific policy as of now for some of the same reasons that we don't have a campus one. They do expect to issue an AI statement at some point. And then just this, I'll point out the Wisconsin Regent policy on acceptable use of information technology resources. Again, it says we can't use these tools to violate the law, including copyright or other intellectual property laws. So let's talk about some of the pitfalls or the potential pitfalls. With US copyright law, they're gathering some comments. If you're interested in providing comments on this, please go ahead and do that. Again, if you have questions about copyright law and AI, you can contact Legal Affairs. So just to highlight like three kind of potential problems here with copyright and AI. So first of all, it's not possible for a computer system to kind of process any kind of information without making a copy of it in its RAM. So if you feed something that's copyrighted into a generative AI system, you are causing it to create a copy, and that could constitute infringement. Also, generative AI, as discussed before, it's learning from existing work. So it creates based on things that already exist. So again, if you feed copyrighted information into a generative AI system and it outputs something that is derivative of that original copyrighted work, that also could constitute infringement. And then finally, if you have some intellectual property, you feed that into generative AI, that could constitute early disclosure, which then could result in rejection of your patent application. So we just need to be aware of kind of how copyright law and IP law interact with these issues of AI. So I'm going to kind of skip over this because I know we're a little bit tight on time, but there are good pro AI arguments and good anti-AI arguments. This is not there are no clear bright lines here for the most part. So there are positive things about use of AI and there are negative things about use of AI, and they hinge a lot on some of the language in copyright law and other laws. So talking about ethics, there are some questions that really pertain to the academic environment. We're concerned about research culture, research quality and integrity, and then the promotion and tenure process. These are things that are all really important in academia. And so when we bring generative AI into this environment, we need to consider, what do we get more of with AI? What do we get less of with AI? How does AI affect notions of authorship? Can we trust AI? What impact does it have on diversity, equity, inclusion, and belonging? And are any of these problems new? So we can unpack that just a little bit. One of the things that generative AI does is reduce burden. So it makes it easier to produce a lot of work. We don't have to do so much in terms of, mechanical tasks and some types of proofreading and editing. So there are some good things here, right? Researchers can spend more time focusing on the actual content of their work and less time on formatting and those other kinds of mechanical tasks. But also, we could end up emphasizing things that we don't necessarily want to emphasize. It could become even more important to produce a lot of work than it is to produce quality work. It increases people's ability to publish in areas outside of their expertise, which we might not want. We could overwhelm publishers and sponsors' submission review systems. And then on the flip side, AI also makes it easier for us to review large volumes of data that overcome some human limitations. And so on the plus side, that could help us overcome some human biases. But on the negative side, the training sets and coding have their own kind of inherent biases. And so some biases baked into the AI system. We're not overcoming all of it. Again, I'm not going over every single bullet point here, just kind of pointing out some high-level things. So those large language models, they're trained on massive amounts of existing work. They don't always tell you where that work came from. They can't always tell you when something's fact and when it's fiction. It's impossible in a lot of cases to correct errors. It can confuse things that have multiple meanings, and it may reinforce biases. So we need to think about some of these things as well. It can facilitate brainstorming. It can increase accessibility of data and information for researchers and the public. It can also contribute to plagiarism. It can hinder reproducibility. It can threaten scientific integrity through mistaken reliance on biased or erroneous LLM training data. It may disproportionately advantage or disadvantage some researchers through like the Matthew effect. So the people who are often cited become even more often cited. And then it could focus the field on some popular research topics that may not be where we'd really like to see it go. So generative AI, when we're talking about authorship, it can do a lot of things that we traditionally associate with authorship, including creating tables and figures and writing sections of text. But authorship is about more than that. These are language models. These are not thinking models. So they have facts and data, but they don't offer the reasoning or the logic behind those facts and data. And we need to remember that. GAI is never going to have, well, maybe not never, but currently is not able to discern or judge the way that humans can. We expect authors to be responsible and accountable, and AI can't do either. So I just want to point this out. It came up earlier about non-native speakers, and this is actually one pro of using generative AI, is that it may help remove barriers to publication and funding for non-native English speakers and people with verbal learning disabilities. So that's good. On the flip side, again, in terms of kind of loud voices, it tends to amplify those. So we're going to get more of what is loud, but not necessarily more of what is truthful or equitable. And so I would just like to pose this question. So the question on the left is it right to use AI to write papers and grant proposals when publishing is used as a barometer of research competency, tenure, and promotion? Or do we need to kind of look at some of the assumptions that underlie the current system? is the current system working? If so, then is AI, really a problem? And then also, what is the point of asking scientists to write documents that can be easily created with AI? So I'm thinking of some parts of research proposals that an AI can handle really quickly. Why are we requiring that if it doesn't really, if it's not really anything that requires input from the researcher specifically? And then in terms of privacy, we covered this already. The safest is to assume that there is no privacy. So be really careful about the data that you're putting in. So again, the CISO statement, be very, very careful about PHI, HIPAA, FERPA. None of those things should be put into GAI. Again, here's the thing about it can be acceptable to enter some of that data into tools or services that have undergone appropriate internal review. And so that's the cybersecurity risk management, data governance, accessibility, purchasing, those kinds of things. If you have questions about any of that, consult a data steward. And then finally, some advice for using generative AI. So the big takeaway for me is there's nothing like being responsible and accountable. If you are willing to take responsibility for what you're doing with AI and you are able to justify it in an ethical sort of way, then go forward with use of the AI. Just kind of some do's here. Always follow sponsor or publisher guidelines. Be aware that they do change frequently. You always want to do the human check, as Ben and Jevin pointed out. You could use GAI for brainstorming and non-creative tasks. You do need to be aware that sometimes it will output like tortured phrases. So it's trying to think of different words for like cloud computing. So it says haze figuring. So you need to be careful of those sorts of things. And then you always want to be upfront and transparent about the specific tools and services you used, what you use them for, and how you use them. This information usually belongs in the materials and methods or acknowledgement section, but individual sponsors or publishers may have specific advice related to that. And then don't ever take AI's word for anything. Again, as Ben and Jevin pointed out, they gave sort of another example, but one of the things that AI likes to say a lot is like, the study addresses a gap in the literature, because that's seen in a lot of academic publishing, but it's not necessarily true in the specific case. So you need to be careful about things like that. Don't use AI to write. In other words, don't use its raw outputs in your text. Don't use it for contract performance without knowing and understanding the terms of your contract, and contacting the contract negotiator who worked on the agreement or the Office of Legal Affairs. So one of the problems is work for hire customers usually expect to own the copyright to the work they pay for. So since these copyright issues haven't been settled for AI, it can be problematic to use it to produce work for hire. And then lastly, don't feel obligated to disclose use of GAI if it's only for mechanics and usage. So if you're using it the same way you would use Word or Grammarly, then there isn't any reason that you need to disclose that. And I will stop there. And if there are any questions, I'm happy to answer them.
Great, thank you so much. We are quite short on time, so we'll do one question, and I don't see any in the chat, so I will ask this one for you. What is your thoughts on if we're publishing for a journal that doesn't have any, official rules or regulations for using AI? Should we assume, or should we reach out to the editor or someone within the organization and ask?
Yeah, I would always reach out to the organization, to the editor, and ask if they don't have anything published, any guidance published. I think that's always the safest thing to do. I think another safe thing to do, as I said before, is just always disclose, be really transparent about how you use the AI and what you used it for. And then that way, that information is there if editors encounter it and they want to know more, have questions or have issues or whatever, then they're aware that it's there and they can engage in conversation.
Thanks so much, Heather. All right, up next we have a page to talk about citation management.
Hello. Oh, my camera's a little low. So yeah, I and I will share my screen. Oh, so as a note, I'll be switching between screens for live demoing versus showing my slides. So you can let me know if for whatever reason it doesn't switch over to the next screen. It looks like I'll have to like share and reshare things. Yeah, I don't know why my slideshow is freezing up. Here we go. We'll just do from beginning, see if that works. Okay. I'm not sure what it's doing, so I'll just leave it displayed like this. So anyway, I'm Paige Wilson, and I work for the Eveling Library for the Health Sciences, and I'm also the Citation Management Coordinator. Just preliminary information, you can always feel free to reach out to me if you have any questions or would like support with citation managers. I'm always happy to do one-on-one consultations or group presentations upon request. And yeah, for my quick agenda, that's Hazel, by the way. So I was just going to give you a really quick overview of citation managers and your options, and also where you can access the citation management guide. And I'll give you a very quick demo of EndNote Basic, which is a free citation manager available to you guys, and show you where to access additional resources. So first, citation managers, for those that don't know, they help you save, organize, share, create, and format citations for your research. And you have lots of options to pick from. So EndNote Desktop, which is EndNote 20 or EndNote 21. There are also older versions. Those ones are paid versions of EndNote that require a subscription, and they run on your desktop of your computer. EndNote Basic is the free online version of EndNote, and it's free for everybody, not just UW-Madison people. Zotero is also free for the basic version, and Mendeley is as well. There are additional options for citation managers, but these are just the ones that our library provides support for. There are things to consider when you're choosing what citation manager you want to use. The biggest one is just what your teammates are using if you happen to be working in a team. So if everyone is using EndNote, for example, you probably would want to use EndNote for that project if you're all going to be editing the same paper, because unfortunately, these citation managers don't play very nicely with each other. So the biggest factor is just what your teammates are using for that project. In terms of cost, yeah, if you want a free one or if you want to pay for extra features. And then, yeah, finally, just functionality, what you're looking for in a citation manager. And in these slides, I have a link to that will take you to a comparison chart of these different citation managers, just in case they have issues picking one. Really, they all have a lot of the same features. It's just whatever you're most comfortable with using. So with that, I'm going to do a demo of EndNote Basic, and I'm kind of wondering if I'll have to stop sharing and reshare. Okay, yep. So before I go to EndNote Basic, I'm first going to show you the citation management guide. So you should be seeing Google. If you don't, yell at me that it's not working. But
We see it.
okay, good. So I know Zoom is finicky with that sometimes, but first I wanted to show you the citation manager guide. So to get to it, you can just Google Eveling Library. And as a note, I have screenshots of everything and little arrows step by step of everything I live demo, just in case you need that later on. But yeah, we should be your first result in Google. And then on the Eveling Library website, these have proxy links to all kinds of resources. So it gives you access to resources that might be behind a paywall. So if you scroll down under other guides, you'll see a link for citation management. And I have a link to this in the presentation too. But this actually has resources for all the different citation managers. So if you click on one, you'll find links to videos and also downloadable handouts for each of the different citation managers. And you'll also see my contact information, so you can feel free to reach out if you happen to have any issues with your citation manager or just would like one-on-one support. So if you were to decide you wanted an EndNote Basic account, all you would need to do is go to the EndNote Basic tab. And on the right here, there's a link for EndNote Basic login. Otherwise, you could just go to endnote.com and there'll be a link for logging in the upper right-hand corner, and it'll take you to the same place. So here you would then click register and then fill out this information to create your account. You don't have to use your UW-Madison email if you don't want to, because this resource is free for everybody. So I'm going to, let me see if I can share. Sorry about that. The share is a little clunky for, okay, so I'll just stay on Chrome since it wants to stay on Chrome. Okay, so I'm just going to sign in since I already have an account here. And pardon my typing. I was signed in Firefox, but it does not want to go to Firefox for some reason for the share option. So once you sign into your account, and it's going to take its sweet time here, I can go to my PowerPoint if it doesn't load. There we go. And I'm sorry for all these red lines. I'm not sure why those are popping up, but this is what it's going to look like if you do create an account. So getting citations into EndNote is pretty easy. So if you were to go into PubMed, all you would need to do is run your search. And then to get citations into PubMed, you would just click the citations you would like to select and then click the Send To button. And you'll see an option right there for Citation Manager. And from there, you can adjust your selection. So you could either do the citations you had selected, all results retrieved by your search, which I don't recommend for millions of results, or all results on the page you're currently looking at. So once you've made your selection, you would just click Create File, and it should save that PubMed file right in your Downloads folder. So to get that into EndNote, all you would need to do is hover your mouse over Collect, click Import References, and then it should take you to a page where you can navigate to that file you had just saved, which it should be in your Downloads folder. And import option is just asking you how EndNote should read the file you just attached, which they actually have a special one for PubMed NLM. So that would be the one you would pick for PubMed. If you happen to use other databases like Google Scholar, those usually use RefMan RAS format. So you could click that one for other databases. And then 2 is just asking if you want to put it in a folder. If you don't have a folder yet created, you can click New Group and it'll create a new folder for you in the selection for EndNote. And yeah, I don't usually use Chrome, which is why I'm not sure why I gave that error, but it should work for you. So what that'll do is it'll send it right to your references. So you can either access it in all my references or under my groups. Those are those folders you can create. And I just realized it didn't work because I didn't actually select the file I had saved, but it works very smoothly either way. And all these steps are in those downloadable guides as well. So what's so great about this? Well, this allows you to access your citations online. You can click their titles to edit them if you happen to see any issues with that citation. You can also share these groups with other people. So if you wanted to make a folder that anyone can add citations to or modify those citations, you can do that using EndNote Basic as well. What most people get really excited about, though, is something called the Cite While You Write plugin. So if you click this Downloads folder right here, this will give you instructions for how to install that plugin. And every citation manager has some version of this plugin. So what's awesome about that, I'm going to stop sharing and reshare my Word document here. Okay, so you should be seeing a Word document. So when you install that Cite While You Write plugin, or Mendeley, I think it's called Mendeley Cite, Zotero, it's just the Word plugin. Anyway, you should see this new little option up here called EndNote. And what's magical about this is if, as you're typing your paper, you want to insert a citation into your paper, all you would need to do is click where you want to insert it, and then click this Insert Citations option in the toolbar. And then you can run a search, usually by title or author of what citation you're looking for in your EndNote library. Click to select it and click insert, and it'll automatically format that citation in your selected style. What's really cool about this is you can add citations retrospectively too. So if you forgot to add a citation earlier in your paper, you just click where you want to insert it, follow the exact same steps as before, and it'll automatically update your bibliography and also those little superscripts for you. And something else very magical is if you need to change a citation style, you can do that at any time using the style dropdown. So if you needed to switch to APA, you just select it and it would change your bibliography and all those in-text citations for you as well. So yeah, it's pretty magical. And I'm going to stop and reshare with my PowerPoint if it lets me. There we go. Okay, so, and as I mentioned, everything I showed you is covered in here with screenshots and also in those little handouts and stuff. But yeah, on this slide, if you want additional information about citation management, this is the link to that guide I mentioned and showed you before for citation managers. Here's a link to the comparison chart of all those citation managers I mentioned, Zotero, Mendeley, EndNote, and EndNote Online. And yeah, also feel free to reach out. I'm always happy to help. I get a lot of requests for people with glitches with citation managers, and I'm always happy to help you work those out. And yeah, I will pause for any questions, which if there aren't any, I'll just say thank you. And thank you for bearing with me with the weird sharing in Zoom. So
Thanks so much, Paige. I know one question came in. Let me scroll up and find it. Okay, a few more just came in. So somebody has EndNote 21 and they were curious if they could collaborate with other basic EndNote users. So would 21 match up with other EndNote users?
yeah, that's a great question. So you can share groups. So you can share folders with people that just have the online version of EndNote if you would like to, and they should be able to access and edit those folders just like you do. The one limitation would be you can't share your entire library because they would need to have EndNote 21 or EndNote 20 as well. And you also can't share PDFs if they don't have that desktop version of EndNote installed. But yeah, you can share groups with each other though. So you can share folders that have citations and you both can edit and access those citations and use those with the Word plugin as well.
Thanks. And there's some just conversation back and forth about Mendeley and Zotero, some pros and cons depending on if you're UW or not. So we have 2 minutes left. So I want to thank all of my speakers today. Fascinating stuff that you guys shared with us. In the next day or so, I will be emailing out everybody that was here today and with the after session feedback survey, just a couple questions to get at how well everybody did today, as well as links to the recording and our resource guide that will have all the links everybody talked about today, as well as contact information and everything in case you want to chat with any of our speakers today. Our next session is next month. It is on manuscript manufacturing. So if you want to learn how to tell your story in your writing, how to best format your writing, really dig into authorship, that will be the session for you. If you haven't signed up for it yet, you still can. Otherwise, you should have the Zoom link. If you guys have any questions, feel free to email me. You can find my email on the website. Otherwise, we will see you next month, and we appreciate you being here with us today. And again, thanks to our speakers. It was wonderful. Have a great day, everyone.